the Max processor that I'm experimenting with now. There are some updates that have been issued, and so I'm going to be putting those in now that I can move on from this product project. So on the scope, this is not making 100%, especially not a negative direction, but it is what it is. It's a race box. Curiously, my FT450D does a very nice job on AM as far as generating 100% modulation. However, the audio, even with a different microphone, is not what you'd hope for on AM. It's definitely, it's as good as any of the vintage rigs like a DX100 or a Viking 2. So anyway, K1WH, AB2RA. Tell me what radio you have.
AB2RA, this is K1WH. I'm running at the moment a Flex 5000. Let's see. Just about 8 watts of carrier now. I bumped it up a little bit. And we're barefoot. I don't even have the amp on. I have an AL1500 sitting here. I didn't even bother turning it on. And I was testing the antenna initially. So the antenna is doing all the heavy lifting, that's for sure. It's a 260-foot doublet fed with 600 ohm open wire line that's fed directly into a Dentron tuner. And the antenna is about 110 feet on one end and about 90 feet on the other end, and about 40 feet in the center. Nothing to need a sky hook for it, but I was going to put a doublet. I was going to put a loop up, and thankfully NE1S gave me some food for thought. Larry said, you should really consider putting a doublet, just feed it right and get multiple bands out of it. No muss, no fuss, less points that you have to hang it from. And I'm glad I took that advice. So I have the room to put up a full 160 meter loop, but I'd probably be forever trying to maintain the darn thing. So anyway, that's what I'm running, and I have the Valiant sitting here. I think you've heard me on the Valiant before, and if things are getting a little hairy here, I can pump up the volume. So with that, over to you, WA3 VJB. This is K1WH.
K1WH with AB2RA. WA3 VJB at the bottom of the hour. Well, the the Flex is doing very well. It came up to about S9, a little bit over S9, almost 10 over, and it just sounds good. The Flexes can be adjusted to sound so good. Guy you probably will encounter on here if you haven't already is Tom, N3CXP, and he has graciously hosted one of the Flex radios at his home near, I think he's near Altoona. No. Pennsylvania, but I forget what town he's near. And there's another guy, AE3J? Maybe it's AE3 Tango, Howard, who runs it remotely from the Frederick, Maryland area down this way. And he doesn't have the property to put up an antenna that Tom is able to put up. And he had a bit of an adjustment problem trying to use it on AM. Howard did remotely. And I wasn't sure whether the flex had been preset to produce good sounding AM in the first place. So Tom had volunteered to get on the air with it from home where it's located and kind of step through whatever sequence the menu tells you to do to get it to sound good, and then use that as a preset that Howard can dial up remotely and have it validated that it is set up correctly for AM. And if there's a problem, I suspected there was a problem somewhere between the head end of the audio, you know, where Howard is actually seated and addressing the microphone, and perhaps the IP sampling rate or some other A to D conversion that is not making its way cleanly to the decoder at the flex end of things. So first we have to validate that the flex is set up properly for AM, and then we can troubleshoot the rest of the audio chain to run it remotely. And that's where Tom N3CXP is stepping in to help, so that's good. And yeah, you worked Gary, WD4 Never Kiss Alligators in Florida. Great connection, 10 watts to 40 watts between his place there and yours in New Hampshire. Wow. The band must have some life in it. He's up early. I've worked him a number of times here in Maryland, and he's up early, and the 40 watts makes the trip just fine. He's also been on late at night here on 40, when, according to the constellation of Kiwi SDR receivers, both of us can get into England, him with 40 watts and myself with a 1/4 kilowatt, into receiver sites that are located on the southern coast of England on 40 meters around 9:30, perhaps 10 o'clock p.m. Daylight time here on the East Coast. So yeah, 40 is a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun since, for myself, since April or May, when static season opens up on 75, 80 meters. And Bob, you'll know how the Chesapeake Bay tends to accumulate afternoon thunderstorms. Well, I just leave the 80-meter antenna grounded, or I'll use it as a scope pickup for this band, and then ground everything else in the afternoons and not have to put up with the static of 80 when 40 meters is so much cleaner. And very good on the doublet instead of the loop. Yeah, Larry's a sharp cookie, and I'm glad you listened to him. He, for many years now, has impressed me with not only the cleanliness of his audio, but also the dominant signal that he produces for us to listen to. Very good indeed. Here comes Janice. I didn't have too much to comment on that time. I'd like to hear more about the Max as paired with the Super Senior, what your impressions are with that. I knew some of the prototype or early production examples were out there. I had actually raised my hand to do so when I heard about that from Clark, N1PCG, and it turned out he had already sent them out to folks like yourself and a couple out in the Pacific Northwest too. So I'd be interested in your impressions of that. AB2RA in the group WA3VJB.
Yeah, WA3VJB, AB2RA. Well, I would say definitely I like it. I've been satisfied, particularly from the standpoint of, you know, the K1WH. You hear constant complaints about protection trips, which is one of the reasons I was running an Innovonics 223. But as it turns out, I've run the Max, and there is sufficient limiting that I don't get any trips when it's properly adjusted. Two of the most significant features, I would say, that are important is the method of compression. Most compressors go to full gain when you stop talking for a period. This one has a feature that holds it at a reasonable level, and that is its distinguishing characteristic over the Innovonics. Also, it has the ability, you can set it up differently, but I have 3 bandwidth selections on mine for the brick wall filter, 3, 4, and 5 kilohertz. And you can set it for much wider. I think it'll go to 8 or something. You know, whoever wants to run 16 KC audio, they can do it. But the nice thing is, you know, I've looked on the SDRs, and you go out to where you set it for, and you know, it drops like a rock. So I'm quite happy with that feature as well. You know, some people may not like the fact that it, you know, just a row of LEDs on it for display, and I believe there are ways to hook VU meters to it, but for the purposes of adjustments, it doesn't seem to need it. So that's my observation on the Macs. I would encourage you to contact them and obtain one. On K1WH on the loop, I have an 80-40 coax fed dipole at 45 feet, and I have individual dipoles for 20, 15, and 10. You know, all completely tunerless. The 80 and 40 obviously has to have a tuner. And I use a 160 loop because I you know, mainly use it for near close-in rag chews. Although I do work into South America and Europe on CW using that loop. You know, I did the 160 CW contest, and I was quite happy how it performed. So let's see. Over to you, K1WH, AB2RA.
AB2RA, K1WH. Yeah, very good. I just recently started to spend a little bit more time trying to mess around with CW and get my speed back. I used to be a CW only operator back in the 90s when I was first licensed. I didn't even have a microphone in the shack. You know, I was a general and just worked DX on CW, and it was a lot of fun. But when I drifted away from radio, I lost my speed. I can still copy, you know, but the speed at which I copy leaves a little to be desired, and but I can send at 30 words a minute. But don't ask me to copy. Copy that. Yeah, very good, Paul. I don't know N3 CXP or AE3T, but if they're, they probably know this already. I used a guide that was put out by Rob W1AEX for the audio settings in the Flex, and it took me months to get it to where I liked it and where people were agreeing it sounds good. I can probably do better, but I had one of those funky voices all low end, so I have a tendency to sound muddy, and that combined with nasal congestion does wonders for audio, huh? But you know, it's finally, I think, palatable. So, but it did take months, and I did use Rob's guide to do that. So I don't know if that would be helpful to him or not. He's now an Anon guy, and the DIY rigs sound very good over there. I know that some folks have complained about RF problems and, the rig shutting down. I guess, it's just like the Flex. There's a little bit of RF floating around. The computer screen will shut down, and all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've gone through 3 boxes of clip-on ferrites and ferrite rings to quell the RF. So anyway, but hopefully you're still all hearing me okay. And with that, I'll send it over to you, Paul. W1, W1, W8.
So I wonder if his thermal cutout got him. It's like 2-meter repeater.
Yeah, I'm talking about an old buzzard. Over to you.
Did you want to slip your call letters in there? Because it broke before you got them in there.
Sure. W83VJB. This is K1WH.
Oh, that's funny. I haven't heard that on an HFAM rig before. I didn't know they had a timer protection in there. On 2 meters, whenever somebody would time out, you could tell that they were still making an old buzzard transmission, especially if you could hear them on the input. And I have to admit, there were times when somebody was chronically buzzarding away and timing out the repeater on a regular basis, somebody, I don't know who, would tend to key up underneath them, which held open the timer reset so it wouldn't happen. And of course, if anybody else didn't know that this was going on, the guy would probably have been accused of talking for like 15 minutes. So don't do that. Don't be that person, Bob. Oh, that's funny. Well, the Flex, I mean, even in its earliest iteration, the Flex 1000, with its separate modules and its cabling, interconnection cables, was known for having RF vulnerability that would lock the thing up. And when the newer Flex 1500 came out, and of course the subsequent models, they tended to have that problem solved, and it's been a lot less of an issue. I had not heard that the Anon had the same problem of RF getting in where it shouldn't be and causing it to lock up or cut out or otherwise fault. But yeah, Rob's another one who's a sharp cookie, W1AEX. He has on his YouTube channel such a wide variety of air check recordings of stations that we listen to ourselves that it's nice to hear someone who has taken great care with his receive audio to the point that when he makes a recording, it can be considered definitive of a station's transmitted audio. And it's very helpful because he does it in a value neutral kind of way. If someone's got a stock Valiant that they don't want to modify, they get an accurate recording of it without any judgments about it as to how it sounds. And they can either take it from there or, choose to make the modifications. So yeah, he does a great public service, Rob does, in doing so. Your signal's holding up fine, Bob. I should point that out. A little bit of stuff got in on the fringe. I don't know if it was the low side or the high side, but stuff was starting to get in. And I'm getting close to dinner time here. Pam was going to come out and get on the second microphone here into the RCA console, but it was before you had started testing, Bob, and I didn't find anyone on the air. So she went back in the house and went about getting dinner ready, and I got a hunch it's not going to be too long from now because we've been able to enjoy ourselves on the radio for a pretty good long time here, Bob. Nice to have worked you this afternoon. And Janice, nice to have you join us as well. Thank you for the comments on the Max. I had a recording rolling, as a matter of fact, and I'll carry that up to the Super Senior Facebook page that I help manage.